Hi, I'm Mina Malik Hussain, and you're watching The Coffee Table, and today I'm getting ready to geek out because we're doing one of those medical shows, but we're going to be talking about vaccines, and not just any old vaccine, but we're talking about the COVID vaccine. So I know that a lot of us have a lot of questions about it, and I think that there's a lot of, generally we seem to be nervous about vaccines anyway, but given that we are in a certain situation, and given that we've all been in lockdown for a very long time now. And the fact that there is a vaccine that has been developed, it has been trialed, people have been taking it safely. We thought that it would be interesting to have a show with people, with doctors, who can demystify the vaccine for us and hopefully make us feel a little bit better about taking it when our turn comes. So I'm really excited to be welcoming today on set our friend, Dr. Usman Tanveer Malik, who is an assistant professor at Shalimar Hospital and the University of Central Florida. He is a diplomate of the American Boards of Internal Medicine and Rheumatology. And joining us from Islamabad over the internets is Dr. Mohsen Ali Abbas, who is a clinical research associate and the chief counselor for the COVID vaccine trial at Shifa International Hospital, where he is also a senior medical officer in infectious disease. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Mohsen from across the internets. I always like to check, and I always call the internets because I'm basically a big uncle in my heart. I own it. So I want to sort of begin at the beginning, Dr. Malik, and for the benefit of all watching. What is a vaccine?
So a vaccine is basically, it can be multiple sorts of things. A vaccine's primary job is to induce in the human body particular kind of immunity.
Right.
So it can be a vaccine so what you will do is you have a microbial organism like a virus or a bacteria. You take a component of the structure of the bacteria or the virus, and you attenuate it, you modify it, you inactivate it, you kill it, but then you preserve the structures of the bacteria and the virus that the human body recognizes. So the human body recognizes that particular protein or that carbohydrate or the envelope of the particular microbial organism, and then it produces antibodies or what we call a T cell response to this microbial organism. And next time, so you got this weakened version of the bug, right? So the human body saw this weak version of like, aha, I got this. I'll take care of this. So the body takes care of this, it mounts and creates an army. Next time when the actual dangerous lethal bug encounters the human body, you already have an army with guns pointing at the bacteria. You don't have to wait for 7 to 10 days for the body to survive the onslaught of the bug and then produce an army and go after it. Because in that 14-day window, that's when the body will either fail to do it or the body will succeed. So if the body had already seen that particular bug before, you already have an army and reservoir. The vaccine's job is to create that army and just keep it there.
And it's a specialized army because viruses are different. Now, there are sorts of different viruses called different diseases, so the body is then developing a specific response to a very specific kind of intruder.
Correct. So basically, if we have time, I can quickly talk about this.
Yes, please do. I love to geek out on this show.
So
Tell me
I am
everything.
sort of I'm a rheumatologist. We do some immunology. So basically, the human body has two ways of fighting any bug. One is called the innate immune system. The other is called the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is what we call broad and shallow. So you get
like
attacked.
A pond.
So the innate immune system is ready to tackle 20,000 enemies, but only for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So it's like the infantry.
It's like an infantry that can tackle multiple things, but it's not specialized. On the other hand, so the innate immune system's job, like the infantry, is to hold the bug till you have time for the second, more specialized part of the immune system called the adaptive immune system to kick in. So the adaptive immune system is narrow but deep.
It is really
so it's specialized.
Yeah, it's like a sniper.
Exactly right. And so you have you have the SSG forces basically.
So commandos.
They're all getting ready. They need time, but once they kick in, all is good to go. So a lot of vaccines will prompt a response of the adaptive immune system by producing antibodies which come from a particular part of the immune system called the B cells. And then you have the T cell response which helps these antibody producing factories called the plasma cells to get ready. So the vaccine primes the innate and adaptive immune systems both, but in the corona vaccine situation, mostly we're thinking about the adaptive immune system. So we're talking about antibody production
Yeah.
and T cell production.
Yeah.
The rockets and the helpers.
And the helpers. I love how specifically, militaristic this metaphor became. Okay, so Dr. Mohsen, you've been running a clinical trial at Shifa International, which is specifically for COVID, the COVID vaccine. What exactly does it mean to be running a clinical trial? What does that mean? Like, what happens in a clinical trial? Why do we do one?
Okay, so we have to start from why do we need a clinical trial?
Yes.
Basically, you're going to administer something that is going to change the biology or physiology, the internal mechanisms of a human body. So there are so many regulatory authorities which are there to check if the drug or the vaccine being administered has been studied, it's safe, its efficacy, its long-term efficacy, its side effects, and its response.
Yeah.
So the way it's done is that we have to start off from basically it has 4 phases.
Right.
Phase 1 is meant for safety. If there is any lethal adverse effect, if there is multi-organ system damage, if there is an expiry, if there is death, so the trial is put to halt. It
Right.
cannot proceed to phase 2. Now, phase 2, it consists of going through the efficacy as to whatever the task the drug or the vaccine is made for, how well that drug is doing the task. So, for example, if we are having a trial of corona vaccine, so we have to see that how many antibodies does it generate in a human body. If it is not generating a significant amount of human antibodies against the
Yes.
coronavirus, there is no use of proceeding this trial, okay? And
Right.
there is no use of giving this vaccine to the human population. Now we proceed to phase 3 where we see the long-term effects. Now we know that the antibodies are being produced, but for how long? I mean, after 1 year, what's the antibody level after 1 year? That's what we're seeing right now, the phase 3. Also, in the phase 3, basically we want to see that if there is any competitive drug out there in the market, we make a comparison to that drug. We make 2 groups. Okay, for one, we need to give them the vaccine or drug being studied, and the other group receives the already being practiced. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, we do not have a vaccine for corona. So what do? We make a placebo group. The placebo group has to be injected with something like normal saline, something that has no adverse effect. Why do we need it?
Yeah.
So for basic layman people, I'm just going to simplify it. If we give everybody the vaccine in phase 3 trial and they go back to the community and 99% of them do not get coronavirus, they're protected. We cannot say scientifically that this vaccine has 99% protection because it can just be due to chance. Okay? There are so many factors. So to eliminate the chance, we have to take equal number of people from the same population, same genetics, same climate. So these people are not getting any vaccine. So we have to compare it, right? That's what happened with Pfizer. Pfizer had a 90% rate in the vaccine group. So that was being compared with a placebo.
Yeah.
Now, when we see a response, a robust response, we need to see long-term effect of the
But
time.
I just want to interrupt you here, Mohsen, because this is like, now I have a question. Is that if we don't have a control group and our test pool has all been sort of given the drug, like, can you sort of, I don't understand, what is it, why can't you say that it has 90% efficacy if 90% of the group doesn't get it? Like, I don't understand the control group here.
It's a very genuine question.
Yeah.
And it's a good question. Let me tell you that. Can you see me now? Basically, we have several factors in human biology. So basically, we have to rule out the other factors, which are called confounders.
Okay.
So for that elimination, we need to have a similar group of similar people, but they're not being given vaccines, so that they have same genetics, same
Yes.
immune responses. They're being exposed to same coronavirus.
Yes.
Obviously, not 100% of them are going to get corona. Some of them are going to be saved from corona, okay?
Which is
Like,
the general sort of the general odd for any unvaccinated
there are odds
population.
for an ordinary guy
Yeah.
versus the odds of a person who is getting vaccine. So
Okay.
when we compare them, both of them from same population,
Yes.
we actually remove the chance effect. Like it can never be due to chance. It has to be
Oh, okay.
statistically significant,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yes.
Or confounder free, right?
Ah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does, because what we're basically saying is that when we're taking groups from this background, so although we can cancel those factors out basically, so we can't say that the vaccine didn't work because of the water, because they all had the same water. I get it. Yeah, I understand. It's a bit like maths. So, Dr. Malik, I know that there are different kinds of vaccines being developed by different companies, right? So we are hearing about the Pfizer one, there's the CanSino one, there's the AstraZeneca/Oxford one. And from what I understand, there are different kind of technologies that have gone into making the vaccines, like different approaches, which I find fascinating. So let's talk about it. So the AstraZeneca Oxford one is using a spike protein.
So basically, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So right now we have maybe 4 or 5 that are either in phase 2 or phase 3.
Yes.
And some of them are past phase 3. We actually have phase 3 data that Dr. Mohsen was talking about.
Yeah.
So the AstraZeneca one compared to the Moderna and the Pfizer one is slightly different. So the Pfizer and Moderna one use a particular kind of genetic material called messenger RNA.
Yes.
Messenger RNA is fragile.
Okay.
That is why these vaccines need to be kept iced much more at much cooler temperature than the Oxford AstraZeneca one or the Sinovac or the Sinopharm vaccine.
Okay.
So the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine relies on DNA, which is a little bit more stable.
Okay.
So what that vaccine has, what they have done, it's really clever. What they've done is scientists at Oxford and AstraZeneca, they took a common cold virus in chimpanzees.
Right.
And they modified it. So the virus can enter the human body, but it won't replicate.
Because again, chimpanzee DNA is very close to human DNA.
It's close to human DNA, and so murine models, which are rat model or chimpanzee models, are well established way of doing research, which can be carried forward into human beings.
Okay.
So this common cold virus that was in chimpanzees, they modified it so it can enter the human cells, but it won't replicate.
So to interrupt, just to clarify, because at this point I do want to talk about, people are like, what's in the vaccine? It's a modified virus that originated from chimpanzees, but is no longer chimpanzee DNA because it was modified.
So that is correct. So the virus itself, it was never chimpanzee DNA.
Yes, very important. I think that Dr. Mohsen also wants to chip in at this point.
So
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Malik. I'm just trying to give my 2 cents on the vaccine that we are having the trial for. So our vaccine also has the adenovirus, which is a very benign virus. It has been attenuated, but it has the spike protein.
Yeah.
Now, the best part about it is that the spike protein does not have any genetic component of coronavirus.
Yes, that's very important. We should sort of repeat it again, that all the proteins in this virus, all the things in the virus have nothing to do with anything that is really odd, like chimps or coronavirus.
Have no component from coronavirus.
Yeah.
So basically, if there is no genetic component from coronavirus, there is no capacity or no potential for this vaccine that we are trying here on Pakistani population to cause COVID infection. While if we take a risk of inculcating genetic material from coronavirus, since this virus is not very well known with the medical sciences, because we just know it from the last 1.5 years, so we don't want to take a risk of injecting DNA, but that's an immunology debate, and it's I think beyond the scope of lay people. But just to make it simple, the vaccine that is being tried here has just the spike protein. That's it from coronavirus. which cannot replicate. But
Very important. Yes,
as
and
Dr.
I want
Malik
to.
said,
Yes. I just want to take a very quick break here because I want to deconstruct the spike protein. So stay with us. Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're having a riveting conversation about vaccines, but the COVID vaccine in particular, with Dr. Usman Tanveer Malik and Dr. Mohsen Ali Abbas. And before we, went to the break, Dr. Mohsen was telling us about spike proteins in the vaccine, and that's where Dr. Malik, you were telling us about how spike proteins are DNA, and DNA-based vaccines operate in one way, and then vaccines, which is like the Oxford AstraZeneca one, and then the Pfizer, the Moderna one, is based on messenger RNA. So how is RNA not DNA?
So let's actually talk about the coronavirus a little bit.
Yes.
So the coronavirus, basically, you have this viruses are very interesting organisms. They are basically they would be free-floating genetic material, just floating out there.
Yeah.
But somehow along the way, they evolved to create this envelope around themselves, so they can protect themselves from the environment. The coronavirus has a particular protein on it called the S protein,
Right.
the spike protein, which has 2 subunits, which we won't talk about. But the
Nuts.
but the S protein, the
Yes.
spike protein, is a critical component in coronavirus's infectivity. So what it does is the virus uses this S protein to climb into the human cells.
Oh, so it's sort of like the Trojan horse protein.
That's exactly right. So it's the Trojan horse of the protein. It's the Trojan horse that allows the virus to climb into the human cells. If the virus didn't have the spike protein, it wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be able to climb in or replicate later on.
Okay.
So what the wonderful, beautifully marvelous thing about the vaccine process, it's the science is just super exciting. It's super smart. So what Moderna and Pfizer did was they took just the genetic material of the virus that produces only that protein.
Wow.
The spike protein, not the virus, nothing else. But only, it's kind of like the bioprint, the blueprint, the instruction manual that the body, hey body, so any part of the human body, if we had that component of the genetic material, the body would, and if, let's say, you took that messenger RNA, you grabbed that portion of the genetic material that only creates the spike protein, and say you took that, you put that into the human cell, and the cell saw that, and the cell, it became part of our body's mechanism, our body's genetic material, and our body produced that spike protein because the genetic blueprint is right there.
Okay.
So now that once the blueprint is translated from the messenger RNA, from the virus's genetic material to produce that spike protein, the human body suddenly sees this weird little spike protein sitting there, and the body's like, what are you doing here, protein?
And
so the
you
body,
don't belong here.
You don't belong
Who
here.
invited you?
That's exactly right. So the body attacks that. But since the actual virus is not there, the lethality and the scary part of the virus was all discarded. It's only that little tiny hook that the body has produced and produced antibodies against. It's absolutely safe. It's very effective. It works really well. So the Pfizer and Moderna data shows that there is no risk of what we call conversion. There is no rate of conversion from the vaccine into an actual infection. Not a single case has been reported. Because it's just impossible. It biologically cannot happen.
Yeah, because the vaccine only has the spike protein in it. It has no virus bit.
It has the blueprint for the spike protein.
The blueprint, not the actual protein. Okay, that's fantastic. That's
so
like
smart.
a key.
It's so smart that they were able to produce the blueprint for the spike protein, insert it into the human body. The body translates that, produces that protein only, and the body attacks it. So when the virus comes, the body's like, aha, I see that hook. That hook, you ain't getting in here.
Like I'd have that key. It's like the body can change the locks then.
Exactly. The body goes after that key and attacks it and kills it. And that's how the body mounts this response against the actual virus. And that's the mechanism for both Pfizer and Moderna.
Right.
Oxford AstraZeneca have done something different. They have used just the inactivated version, so attenuated version of the chimpanzee. So they chimpanzee common cold, and they use that DNA. They basically insert that into the human body. It produces that reaction against this weak virus, and that's how you get the vaccine properties. So it's slightly different, but because it's DNA compared to RNA, RNA is slightly fragile. Think of that as something that can fracture easily. DNA is more stable.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't need to store the Oxford AstraZeneca at super cool temperatures
Yes.
compared to Moderna and
Pfizer, which need like, I wouldn't even say sub-zero, but like subber than sub. Like -70 is crazy. Like, who does that? Like, obviously it's required. That's why they do it. So, Dr. Mohsen, I understand that the clinical trial that is being run at Shifa is in collaboration with CanSino. So is their vaccine, which camp does that vaccine fall into? The more stable one or the really, really cold temperature one?
So that's a very good question. Number one, I just want to tell you this part that of all the vaccines out there, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, it's the only vaccine that has been actually tried on the Pakistani genetics, Pakistani immune responses, and Pakistani demographics from every walk of life.
Yes.
From Rediwala to a bureaucrat to a general. Every tier of society has participated, and so far I have managed to counsel 7,500 people, out of which 6,500 people got the vaccine. There has been no hospital admission, no side effects, but there are some symptoms that are expected of even flu vaccine, that is mild fever, 100-101, body aches, myalgias, which is responding to Panadol. The idea that
which is, again, sorry, I just want to interrupt, but having these kind of mild side effects are normal and can happen when you have any vaccine. So there's nothing to sort of feel panicky about.
Even child immunizations.
Yeah.
But the plus part is this, that Dr. Saab was talking about Moderna, AstraZeneca. First of all, they have not been tested on Pakistani population. They have been tested on Caucasians.
Right. So why is
Americans.
it important? Why are we making a distinction here between Caucasians / white people and Pakistani people who are not Caucasians? Like, why is this important?
Different genetics, they have different immune responses, they have different climates, different genetics, different biological and genetical components. Okay,
right.
Our immune responses are different, our strains are different, our climate is different. Number two, these vaccines, even though they're having RNA, but they are still genetic components. The one we are having here has only the protein part, no genetic component from COVID. That means that you don't need to have a blueprint for S protein. It's the S protein itself put in the vaccine, and the body identifies, it's some foreign antigen. We need to identify it, we need to create antibodies against it, and that's how. And now, number three, our own doctors from Shifa got vaccinated and they got their antibody titers done at 4th week. And the cutoff is 2.2, and they had antibody titers of 28.9. That was really high response. So that's something good. And having 6,500 people only from Shifa and 14,000 Pakistani people all over Pakistan, Shifa, Aga Khan, Shaukat Khanum, Indus, and UHS, being monitored by NIH, Drug Regulatory Authority, Pakistan Bioethics Committee. I think that any other vaccine has to be tested on our people, because we are different. We don't have the same genetics. We don't have the same immune responses as Americans or Europeans. We are brown people. We are Pakistani people. We need any vaccine that is going to be given to our people has to be tested on our people.
Quite right.
Because for general people, for laymen, I'm going to tell them that this vaccine has already been tested on Pakistani people, and we're going to submit an interim analysis in the second or third week of January, and it's going to be there out in the Pakistani market around March or April. I am working at Shifa. I do not have any association with CanSino. It's just that if it was any vaccine, any brand, I do not care about the brand, but this is some plus point that it has been tested on Pakistani population and it does not have any genetic component. Other than that, I would want you to now touch on some myth busting, because that's
let's do
very
it.
important for Pakistani population, because I've seen we blame rural population all the time. We blame illiterate people, but I've seen PhDs, I've seen scholars coming up with weird questions.
Yeah.
So I would highly encourage if we touch on that area
yes.
as well.
So, what is the most misgiving that people express when you see them about vaccines / the COVID vaccine in specific?
Castration to start with. Are you guys going to make us infertile, impotent by vaccinating us? Number two, does this have anything to do with Bill Gates or 5G chips? Number three, are we going to have neurologically impaired kids? Number four, and there are so many, and I have to answer them at going at their level. If it's an educated guy, I have to talk at that guy's education level. But if it's somebody over the street, he's not very well educated, I have to translate things into their language and just tell them the logical thing, though, so that they have the exact and correct knowledge. A lot of it has to be blamed on the misconceptions and conspiracy theories being dispersed out in people through social media.
Social media. Go and like Dr. Malik, you also write sci-fi, but I think that it's just quite sort of interesting that people might think that there's like a chip in the vaccine. Like Bill Gates wants to turn us into robots.
What's funny is.
I'm laughing, but I know that people take it seriously.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, we really shouldn't be bringing politics into it, but there is a certain ruler in a certain part of the world that has prompted a lot of these conspiracy theories.
Yes.
I call him a ruler and not a statesman because he really isn't.
No.
So that he has helped the world, he has nudged the world into an age of disinformation and misinformation. So, you asked the question about the chip. It's really funny. People say, oh, they're going to put a chip in the vaccine so they can monitor me, and they have a dual chip SIM phone in their pocket all the time. That is being actively monitored by probably 4 intelligence agencies.
This is true.
So people who talk about chips to be monitored, being administered through these vaccines, I'm not really sure that I would give them much credibility. They really haven't thought this through. I do want to say, piggyback on Dr. Mohsin's comments, I am filled with admiration for the work their team is doing and the people at Shaukat Khanum are doing work. It is so important to test a vaccine in indigenous populations. So the Sinovaccine and the Sinopharm vaccines have been tried, I believe I want to say in 12 or 16 countries. Dr. Mohsin probably knows more than I do. Anywhere from Brazil to Turkey to African countries, Pakistan, Indonesia. And I also want to say this very clearly, that the Sinovaccine or the Sinopharm vaccines are probably Pakistan's best hope. Because they are stable, they are better, they're going to be more readily available, and for our population, they're probably going to be cheaper.
Yes.
And I don't think we're going to have access to Pfizer or Moderna for a while. Even if we do, it's going to be out of the reach of the masses. So I think what these people, their work is extremely important. And if we can get these into the marketplace by March, I would be the first in line to get them. And have my family members and my kids get them, because the vaccines are safe. I've looked at the data of Sinopharm. I've looked at the data for Sinovac, for Moderna, Pfizer, and Oxford. And the data is similar. I also want to define efficacy.
Yes.
So we talk about vaccines being efficacious.
Yes.
Normally, the benchmark we use is 50% efficacy when it comes to flu vaccine. All these vaccines have passed that benchmark. So the Sinovac and the Sinopharm vaccines have both passed the benchmark, and they have good efficacy.
So does that mean that everybody who got the shot, 50% of them won't get the disease?
So that would be the passing criteria.
If this was an
exam, you would say 50% great, you passed. But now we're talking about data that's exceeding 60%, 70%, even 90%.
Yes.
So in the data from Turkey, which was, I think, a small population for the Sinovac, was up to 90%.
That's fantastic.
It was a small population, though, small powered. So the vaccine is extremely safe. And as far as myth busting goes, no, it does not cause autism. No, the vaccines do not have any 5G or infertility delivering machinery. None of that is true. These vaccines are safe. You and I have been using this for polio. We've been using this for smallpox historically, not anymore.
Yes.
Polio, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, and we use it all the time. I'm a rheumatologist. My patients are immunocompromised. I give them vaccines and they survive.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Mohsen?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Malik, for the admiration, and I'm so thankful for your kind words. And you're always welcome to Islamabad to still enroll in our trial, because we're having cohort 4, which is just for which has a very small sample. Number 2, the other important thing that I want to highlight at this point, since I've talked to so many Pakistani people from every walk of life.
Yes.
I have written a formal letter to Prime Minister himself that we are still struggling with polio vaccine. All of the people are not willing to take the vaccine.
Yes.
We are going to give it in March. Yes, but how many people are willing to take it? According to Gallup, 40% Pakistanis do not even consider corona as a real thing. We need so much work in awareness, so much work, and we need assistance from media, we need assistance from government to actually educate and promote awareness in our people, because we do not want to lose the number of lives that we already lost in first wave. The
And
second
also,
wave,
it's true, isn't it true also, Dr. Mohsen, that in order for any vaccine to be successful, you need a certain amount of people to take it, because unless you have 60 or 70%, vaccination, that you can't have herd immunity if not enough people take a vaccine.
Sample size was basically, our target sample size was 10,000. Now we have crossed 14,000. The vaccine is going to be in the market. So that's not a problem now. The problem is getting the people, getting the masses ready to take the vaccine. Now, I just want to request the media, and also I have put a written request to the Prime Minister himself, that we need to create awareness campaigns countrywide so that we do not have to lose that much lives again. Because
quite right.
I'm also working in the COVID ward of Shifa International, which is a very good hospital in Islamabad. We used to have 1 or 2 expiries every month in the first wave, but in the second wave we are having expiries every other day. And we had 118 expiries in first wave, 6 months of first wave. Second wave, 2.5 months, we have crossed 180 expiries. And the most, terrifying thing is this, that these people who are losing their lives or going to critical care are not just old people with so many comorbids. These guys are young. The people above 30 and below 30, losing their lives to this virus. Now, in second wave, they're the same. And in second wave, the COVID is presenting with multi-system diseases. It's a very serious issue. Yeah. And I want to reach out to our people who are watching us, listening to us. It's a real thing. It's a dangerous thing. And all these conspiracies, these castration conspiracies, this 5G and everything, it's just not going to help when somebody's family is hit with, God forbid, if somebody loses their family or loved one just because of this virus. Ask them, talk to them. They'll let you know that how deadly this virus is. Please, whenever the vaccine is in the market, I don't care which brand you take. I do not represent any brand. Yes, the brand that I am working on, CanSino virus, has been tested on Pakistani population, and any other brand has to go through the same trial due to NIH, Drug Regulatory Authority, Pakistan, and Pakistani National Command and Control Center, so that it has to be tested on Pakistani population. Whatever vaccine you have available, get it. And I want people who are understanding our conversation, spread the word to the people who do not know or do not take it seriously. I humbly request all of the people listening to me, Dr. Malik, and to our whole crew right now talking about this vaccine.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break to let that sink in, and we'll be with you in a second. Stay with us. Welcome back to the coffee table. We're having such an informative and important conversation about the COVID vaccine with Dr. Usman Tanveer Malik and Dr. Mohsen Ali Abbas. And what I do want to ask now at this juncture is, I know that a lot of people, one of the reasons why they're a little skeptical of this particular vaccine is that it people think that it was developed really fast compared to other vaccines, because I think the general idea is that vaccines take years to develop and thereby are probably safer and better because it just took that long. But the COVID vaccine's been developed in under a year. And how is that possible?
So, honestly, it is a marvel of scientific advancement that the vaccine was able to be created in such a short time. So, but anytime we talk about things speeding up, of course, there's always concern that the scientific method, whether it was rigorously applied or not. And in the case of these vaccines, absolutely yes. You have to think about it this way. This is no ordinary disease. This disease didn't erupt in a small part of, I don't know, Androon Lahore or sub-Saharan Africa, where the richest people in the world are unfortunately right now probably more Western than Eastern. So most of the money that they're going to spend on health, they're going to spend on situations where they are themselves adversely affected.
Yes.
When that happened, because of this pandemic, so much money, so much scientific eye. You have to think about it this way. As an example, the New England Journal of Medicine, the NEJM, which is one of the most respected medical journals in the world, historically, say, receives maybe, 50 submissions a month for publication. After COVID-19 hit the world, they were receiving up to 1,000 submissions a month. Because everyone in the world was desperate to find a solution. This is historically unprecedented, hence the efforts were historically unprecedented. So much money was poured in, so many scientific teams, the entire world was working on a vaccine. So does it surprise us that they succeeded? Not at all. You have to think about it. So the second factor that you should think about is all the mechanisms, the machinery for working on vaccine research in this context was already in place.
Quite right.
Messenger RNA technology or the traditional inactivation or attenuation technologies, we've been using them for almost 100 years now. Messenger RNA is recent. It's just in the last 5 to 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. But the machinery was already in place and they got the perfect candidate. So they went after it with a vengeance and hence we succeeded.
And isn't it also true, Dr. Mohsen, that the coronavirus is not generally, I know it's called the novel now, but it's also a variant. Like we've seen it before in the shape of SARS, for example, and I believe there's MARS as well. So in a way, we were already kind of halfway there already because we've seen variants of this virus before.
Very good question. So coronavirus is actually a family. It has many viruses under its umbrella. So this guy that showed up just 1.5 years ago, it's a different variant. So this variant has not been studied that much. Other coronaviruses and SARS viruses have been studied. The other thing that I want to touch on is that why Pfizer was so successful and it made to the market so early. So from the technology part, I think Dr. Malik has explained really, really well. I just want to throw some light on this research policy that all the researching institutes have, and the WHO allows it. So whenever there is a pandemic that hits the world, any research in the making has to go through a lot of analyses. But when the pandemic is there, the WHO and all the authorities give some relaxations of submitting an interim analysis. And they also have to submit the end result analysis, but before that, halfway through, they can submit interim analysis so that the vaccine can be in the market and reach out to people who need it already. They're very in dire need of this vaccine. So that's how Pfizer made it quickly to the market. But there is nothing that is out of the policies of ethical policies of research.
Which includes, and which also I assume includes that every vaccine that's developed for anything has to go through certain kinds of trials, has to be tested on certain amounts of people. There's, all of that, those procedures you can follow. You can do all of those procedures in 5 years, or you could do them in 2 years, or you could do them in 1 year, depending on the urgency and the funding and all of that. Is correct?
throughout the yes, correct. Throughout the globe, there were 400 trials that were started just for the COVID vaccine. Of these trials, only 31 made it to human level,
Oh,
and
okay.
of these 31, only 9 made it to phase 3.
Yeah.
So that's how much rigorous effort was put in to get to these vaccines. These scientists, these researchers, they're working day in, day out to get this vaccine. But there was no relaxation in bioethics,
Yes.
human safety, and human health, wellness. They have to be very careful because they're already struck by a pandemic. They don't want to create another one, right?
Quite
So
right.
that's why
Yes.
yeah, that's why they were tightly regulated, but there were leniencies in the technicalities and the formal paperwork, so that the end analysis is going to be submitted afterwards, but they
Yeah.
are going to submit an interim analysis. That's what Pfizer did, and that's what we are going to do. We are going to submit an interim analysis while we are going to follow our participants for a whole 1 year. But we'll
Yeah.
submit interim analysis, and the NIH is going to let us get this vaccine to the market so that everybody can have it.
And at this point, I also talk to you a little bit about vaccine readiness, because I believe that the WHO has a whole kind of procedure called, VIRAT. But it's basically like countries have to be assessed, their vaccine readiness also has to be assessed. So could you just sort of explain what that means a little bit?
So vaccine readiness, if you ask me about at a country level, vaccine readiness is so it has two components basically. It has a financial component, obviously, because you have to order so many vials for each and every person.
Yes,
So for the rich countries, they're already putting in funds. They have the funds ready. But a country like Pakistan, our funds were moved in the ECC, initially 150 million, but now they've moved to $250 million, but still they're not going to be enough. So that's the vaccine readiness. But the WHO is going to assist us in such a way that we can, get some funding through other well-off countries and the foundations. They're working already. And the other part of vaccine readiness is basically the collective perception of the vaccine, I would say.
Right.
So,
and also infrastructure concerns, I imagine, because at this point, even if the vaccines that we do get are more stable, but there are also protocols that have to be followed for storage. And then once you kind of open a vaccine packet, it has to be used within 5 days. And there's also all of that. So what challenges do you foresee, Dr. Malik, for at least Pakistan in terms of administering the vaccines and that schedule?
I think infrastructure and receptibility of the population are two quite big factors in this situation. I think I have hope, and I'm optimistic that actually it's probably going to be all right. I'll compare it to the US. So the richest and the most developed country in the world, right? I follow the politics there quite closely because I trained in the US. So even in the US, with the delivery of, say, 300,000 vaccines, the federal government's response was so bad, the coordination was so horrible that the states had no idea how to prioritize, allocate, and distribute. So every state is doing its own random thing. So the system there is right now no better than Pakistan.
Right.
So in that way, I think actually the Pakistan government's federal response might be better. It may actually have a chance to show performance in a year that promises to be better than hopefully 2020.
Yes.
So I think I have hope, and I'm optimistic that despite all our reservations and all our systemic weaknesses and infrastructure issues, I think we should be okay. That's my hope.
That's good. That's sort of like,
A hope not based on data.
Yeah. All the hope can't be data-based. Yes, Dr. Mohsin.
Basically, I just want to give you a hope based on facts.
Very good. We have both kinds of hope now.
Yeah. So America does not have polio to struggle with. So we have vaccinators hired by government already. We have vaccination teams. We have the setups, the hierarchy to deliver the vaccines. All we need is from government. The government is going to get the funds. We have so many staff already working for the government. They are delivering polio vaccine.
Quite right.
Why can't they deliver a corona vaccine?
Yeah,
they can.
they can.
So America is not fighting with polio since they are just having EPIs and immunization schedules of early childhood. But
so we already have a delivery system in place.
Yes. So as far as infrastructure is concerned, I'm going to give you a very fact-based hope that we have the infrastructure, we have the manpower, we have the human resource. We just need to basically change the mindset of our people and their perceptions towards the vaccine. And that is
we have to be willing to take it.
And Meena Malik, I'm going to ask you and everybody on the media side to just spread awareness. It's going to go a long way, and it's going to be a great cause, and may Allah, give you the highest blessings for this, that you create awareness and you keep creating awareness. I'm sorry to ruin your close up, but I had to put this word.
No, I think that's crucial. That's crucial. I think it's something to really carefully consider. We have access to a vaccine. We have an effective infrastructure in place that is already doing wonderful work controlling polio in the region. We have so many doctors who are working at the front lines, both doctors on my show included, who have been working day and night to keep us all safe. And what we need is willingness, and we need information. And here it is. And the sooner that we all are able to reassure ourselves about the vaccine, about the ways that we can all work together to help control and combat this situation, is the faster we can return to our normal lives, and we can return to safe and healthy lives where we're not sort of living in fear every time somebody sneezes. It's a very serious thing that we're contending with. But again, I like to say that it's a real triumph of science and human ingenuity that we've been able to reach this point at all. So thank you for watching. Please share this show. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Coffee Table. Stay safe. Bye.